3:42 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The phone screams first. Not ring screams. A tone that pierces through walls, through sleep, through the illusion of safety. It is the sound designed to wake a nation. Every device in every home erupts simultaneously. Television screens flicker to life in darkened bedrooms. Radios crackle on kitchen counters. Smartwatches vibrate against knit stands. The message scrolls across every screen in block letters. National emergency alert. Nuclear detonation confirmed. Shelter immediately. The words do not feel real. They feel like a test, a mistake, a glitch in the matrix of normalcy. But the tone continues. The message repeats. And in command centers from Cheyenne Mountain to the Pentagon, officers stare at screens that confirm what cannot be denied. A tactical nuclear device is detonated on Allied soil in Eastern Europe. The yield is estimated at 15 kilotons. Smaller than Hiroshima, but large enough to vaporize a city center. Large enough to trigger Article 5. Large enough to shatter the post-Cold War peace that an entire generation believed was permanent. For American families, the war does not begin with soldiers or missiles. It begins in pajamas. It begins with trembling hands reaching for phones that suddenly will not connect. It begins with children asking questions that have no good answers. It begins with the realization that the invisible line separating peace from war has been crossed, and no one knows what comes next. This is not a drill. This is not history. This is now. Hour 1. The confusion, the first hour is defined by paralysis disguised as motion. Across the country, families react in predictable patterns. Some freeze, staring at screens, waiting for clarification that will not come quickly. Others move frantically, grabbing car keys, throwing clothes into bags, yanking children from beds. The highways begin to fill before dawn. Interstate exits clog with vehicles moving in every direction, drivers operating on instinct rather than information. But the truth is brutal and counterintuitive. Most movement in this moment is dangerous. The blast occurred thousands of miles away, but the fallout radioactive particles, carried by jet streams and weather systems, is already being modeled by meteorologists and military analysts. Depending on wind patterns, invisible death could be settling over farmland, suburbs, and cities within hours. Driving into the unknown is driving into potential exposure. The families who survive the first hour are not the ones who move fastest. They are the ones who stop, who breathe, who turn off the panic and turn on the radio. Emergency broadcast frequencies crackle to life with voices that are steady but strained. The Federal Emergency Management Agency begins issuing directives. The language is clear. Shelter in place unless within 20 miles of a military installation or major metropolitan area. The reasoning is simple. In the immediate aftermath, the greatest threat is not the bomb itself. It is the cascade of consequences. Electromagnetic interference disrupts communication grids. Power substations trip offline as demand surges. Cell towers overload and collapse under the weight of millions attempting simultaneous calls. Information becomes the most valuable resource, and it is suddenly scarce. Inside homes, the confusion manifests in 1,000 small ways. A father in Ohio checks his phone repeatedly, trying to reach his daughter studying abroad. The calls do not connect. A mother in Arizona fills the bathtub with water, following half-remembered advice from a disaster preparedness class she took a decade ago. An elderly couple in Tennessee argues about whether to drive to their son's house 3 states away or stay put. They have no clear answer because no one does yet. The mind struggles to process catastrophe at scale. It seeks patterns, explanations, timelines. But in this moment, clarity is a luxury. The only certainty is that the old rules no longer apply. Hours 2 through 12. The shelter by the second hour, the directive has been repeated enough that most families comply, not out of understanding, but out of exhaustion. The initial adrenaline spike fades, replaced by a heavy, disorienting fatigue. The body knows it is in crisis, even when the mind resists. The concept of sheltering is simple. The execution is not. Most American homes were not built with nuclear threats in mind. Basements exist, but they are filled with holiday decorations, exercise equipment, and forgotten boxes. Interior rooms on ground floors become makeshift bunkers. Bathrooms, closets, hallways without windows, any space that puts mass between flesh and fallout. Families drag mattresses against walls to create additional barriers. They seal windows with plastic sheeting and duct tape, trying to prevent contaminated air from seeping inside. They fill every container with water sinks, pots, buckets, empty soda bottles because the broadcast warnings are explicit. Municipal water systems may remain functional for hours or days, but there is no guarantee. The science of fallout is invisible and terrifying. Radioactive isotopes, cesium, strontium, iodine drift on wind currents, settling on rooftops, lawns, and streets. The particles emit gamma radiation that penetrates walls and skin. Exposure in the first 24 hours can mean acute radiation syndrome. Symptoms begin with nausea and vomiting. They escalate to hemorrhaging and organ failure. Death follows in days or weeks. But distance and shielding reduce exposure exponentially. A basement with 2 feet of earth overhead cuts radiation by 90%. An interior bathroom on a ground floor with a second story above offers significant protection. Time also becomes an ally. Radiation decays rapidly in the first 48 hours. The same environment that is lethal on day 1 may be survivable by day 3. This is why the families who remain calm and still have the highest chance of living. Inside the shelter, a new rhythm establishes itself. One person monitors the radio, writing down updates on paper because phones are dying and chargers are useless if the grid is down. Another manages supplies, rationing water and food into portions that will last 3 days minimum. Another tends to the psychological fractures, comforting a child who does not understand why they cannot go outside, reassuring a grandparent whose memory of Cold War drills comes flooding back with visceral terror. The air inside grows stale and warm. Without ventilation, carbon dioxide builds. Without routine, time becomes elastic. Hours stretch into what feels like days. The silence outside is unnatural. No traffic hum. No airplane engines. No distant lawn mowers or barking dogs. Just wind and the occasional creak of a house settling. Fear is a presence in the room as real as any family member. It sits in corners and whispers questions no one wants to voice. Is this just the beginning? Will there be more strikes? Is anyone coming to help? The radio provides fragments of answers. NATO has convened emergency sessions. The President has addressed the nation, confirming that the United States is not under direct attack, but is mobilizing defensive and retaliatory measures. Missile defense systems are active. Strategic bombers are airborne. Submarines have moved to launch positions. The language is careful, designed to project strength without escalating further. But the subtext is clear. The world is on the edge of a precipice, and no one knows if it will step back or fall. Hours 12 through 24. The endurance, the second phase of sheltering, is harder than the first. The novelty of crisis has worn off, replaced by the grinding reality of confinement. Children grow restless. Adults grow irritable. The bucket in the corner, lined with a trash bag and serving as a makeshift toilet, becomes a symbol of degradation that no one discusses, but everyone resents. Hunger is not yet critical, but thirst begins to assert itself. The human body is fragile in its dependencies. 2 liters per person per day is the minimum. A family of 4 requires 8 liters daily. Most homes do not have this stored intentionally. The water in the heater tank, the reservoir in the toilet, the melted ice from the freezer, all of it becomes inventory. Food decisions require discipline. The instinct is to eat normally, to maintain some illusion of routine, but normal is gone. Meals become functional. Crackers, canned soup, peanut butter eaten from the jar. Calories are consumed not for pleasure, but for fuel. The family that eats with restraint will outlast the one that empties the pantry in panic. The radio updates grow more structured. Meteorologists release fallout projection maps. Certain regions are advised to remain sheltered for 72 hours. Others, farther from predicted plume paths, are cleared to venture outside briefly with precautions. The maps are color-coded. Red for extreme danger, yellow for caution, green for relative safety. But the maps are models, not guarantees. Wind shifts. Rain accelerates particle deposition. Reality is more chaotic than any simulation. Communication with the outside world remains fractured. Some text messages slip through intermittently. Social media platforms are flooded with rumors, contradictory reports, and footage of unclear origin. A video claims a second detonation in the Pacific. Another insists that Russian forces are massing on the Polish border. A third shows empty grocery store shelves in Atlanta, Los Angeles, and Chicago. The truth is impossible to verify, so belief becomes a matter of temperament. Optimists cling to reassurances. Pessimists prepare for worse. Outside, society is fracturing along invisible lines. In some neighborhoods, residents organize quickly. They knock on doors, check on elderly neighbors, pool resources. In others, fear breeds isolation. Curtains stay drawn. Doors remain locked. Trust evaporates. The families who endure are the ones who impose structure on chaos. They create schedules. Morning check-in with the radio. Mid-meal. Afternoon rest period. Evening discussion. Even arbitrary routines provide psychological anchors. The mind craves predictability, especially when the external world offers none. Night falls on the first day with a darkness that feels absolute. Power is out across most regions. No streetlights, no porch lamps, no glow from distant cities. The stars are visible in a way they have not been for generations, bright and cold and indifferent. In the shelter, a father holds a flashlight under his chin and tells his children a story. It is not a happy story, but it is a human one. It is a reminder that even in the worst moments, connection persists. Love persists. The will to continue persists. Hours 24 through 48. The adaptation the second day brings a subtle shift. The acute panic has subsided, replaced by a duller, more sustainable anxiety. The body adjusts to confinement. The mind begins to accept the new parameters of existence. The radio broadcasts evolve. Government agencies begin to coordinate more effectively. The initial chaos is giving way to structure. Evacuation orders are issued for specific zones based on radiation readings taken by ground teams and aerial drones. Shelters, schools, community centers, armories are designated as intake points for displaced populations. Medical triage stations are established in regions beyond the fallout shadow. For families still sheltered in place, the question becomes, when to move? The answer is not universal. Those in yellow zones, where radiation levels are elevated but not immediately lethal, face a calculated risk. Staying put conserves supplies but prolongs exposure. Moving toward designated safe areas offers access to resources but requires travel through potentially contaminated environments. The decision is made more difficult by the lack of perfect information. Radiation is invisible. Geiger counters are rare in civilian hands. The only guidance comes from official channels, and trust in those channels varies. Some families follow directives without question. Others, remembering past government failures, hurricanes, pandemics, economic collapses, choose to rely on instinct. Those who do move follow protocols designed to minimize exposure. Skin is covered completely. Long sleeves, pants, gloves, makeshift masks fashioned from cloth or coffee filters. The goal is to prevent inhalation or skin contact with particles. Travel is done quickly in enclosed vehicles when possible. Windows remain sealed. Air conditioning is turned off to prevent outside air from entering the cabin. The landscape they drive through is surreal. Empty highways, abandoned vehicles with doors open and keys still in the ignition. Gas stations with shattered windows. The occasional checkpoint manned by National Guard units in hazmat gear, directing traffic and scanning for contamination with handheld detectors. In the shelter, those who remain continue the discipline of endurance. Water is rationed more severely now. A cup in the morning. A cup in the evening. Washing is done with wet wipes or damp cloths. The body adapts, becoming more efficient, more resilient. Sanitation becomes a critical focus. Waste must be managed carefully to prevent illness. Bags are sealed and stored away from living areas. Hands are washed with precious water and soap. The specter of disease, dysentery, infections, food poisoning looms as large as radiation. Psychologically, the second day is often harder than the first. The adrenaline has fully faded. Reality has settled in. The realization that this is not a temporary disruption but a fundamental change weighs heavily. Conversations grow quieter. Silences stretch longer. Each person retreats into private thoughts, imagining what comes next and fearing the answer. Yet in this heaviness, something else emerges: resilience. The human capacity to adapt to horror is staggering. What felt impossible yesterday feels manageable today. The mind recalibrates. The new baseline is established. Survival is no longer a question of if, but how. Hours 48 through 72. The threshold by the third day, the immediate danger begins to recede. Radiation levels in many areas drop to 1/10 of their initial readings. This does not mean safety, but it means survivability. The families who sheltered effectively have reduced their cumulative exposure to levels that will not cause acute illness. The broadcasts confirm what many have hoped. The nuclear exchange has not escalated into full-scale war. The single detonation was a line crossed, but not a door thrown open. Diplomatic channels, fractured but functional, have pulled the world back from the brink. Retaliatory strikes have been threatened, but not executed. The posture is one of tense, furious restraint. For the United States, the crisis shifts from existential to logistical. The priority is no longer preventing annihilation, but managing the aftermath. Millions of people are displaced. Infrastructure is damaged. Supply chains are severed. The economy is in freefall, though markets remain closed to prevent complete collapse. The families emerging from shelters face a world that is recognizable but altered. Power is restored in some regions, absent in others. Water service is intermittent. Food is scarce in stores, though government distribution centers are being established. Lines form long, orderly tents. People wait for hours for rations of bottled water, canned goods, and medical supplies. The social fabric shows both its strength and its fragility. In some communities, cooperation dominates. Neighbors share resources. Local leaders organize watch groups and supply networks. Churches, mosques, and community centers become hubs of mutual aid. In other areas, fear breeds suspicion. Hoarding increases. Confrontations escalate. The line between order and chaos is thin, maintained only by collective agreement to uphold it. For families, the focus shifts from survival to adaptation. The questions are no longer about the next hour, but the next week, the next month. How to secure consistent food and water. How to protect health without reliable medical access. How to maintain sanity in a world where normalcy feels like a distant memory. Children ask when school will reopen. Parents do not have answers. Employers send messages about remote work as if the infrastructure for such things still exists. The cognitive dissonance is profound. The world has changed, but the systems designed for the old world limp forward, trying to function. At night, families gather around radios and listen to updates. The president speaks again, promising recovery, resilience, and accountability. The words are meant to reassure, but they feel hollow. Trust has been eroded, not by malice, but by helplessness. The government could not prevent the bomb. It could not restore power instantly. It could not make the danger disappear. What it could do and what it did was provide guidance that saved lives. The families who followed the shelter-in-place orders, who rationed water and food, who remained calm and structured, they endured because someone somewhere thought through this scenario and prepared messaging for it. The system, imperfect as it was, functioned well enough. The new normal, as the 72nd hour passes, the realization settles. This is not temporary. The old world, the world of easy abundance, unquestioned stability, and distant wars, is gone. What replaces it is uncertain. Some aspects of life will resume. Power grids will be repaired. Supply chains will be rebuilt. But the psychological scar remains. Every plane overhead will be watched with suspicion. Every emergency alert will trigger visceral fear. The illusion of safety, once shattered, cannot be fully restored. Families begin the work of rebuilding, not just homes, but lives. They take stock of what was lost and what remains. Photographs, heirlooms, routines, relationships. Some things can be replaced. Others cannot. The first 72 hours tested endurance. The next 72 days will test adaptation. And the years that follow will test memory, whether this moment fades into history or remains a living caution. The lesson is brutal and simple. Civilization is fragile. The systems that provide water, food, power, and order are maintained by invisible work and unspoken agreements. When those systems fracture, survival depends not on strength, but on preparation, discipline, and community. The families who endure are not the strongest. They are the ones who remain calm long enough to think, who act with purpose rather than panic, who understand that resilience is built one decision at a time. The world changed in an instant. But survival is measured in hours, days, and the quiet determination to continue. This is not the end. This is the threshold. What comes next depends on what is done now.